Sometimes it must feel like when you watch the news that the unions always get a bad rap. And the reason you feel like that is because it's true, they do. There is no doubt that there's an institutional media bias against the unions, and why wouldn't there be? Because unions cost media moguls money. And this institutional bias is built into the various media systems and structures for gathering, producing and disseminating news and entertainment. There's actually been a lot of studies done which prove that unions receive scarce and overwhelmingly negative coverage, and they also have pointed to the fact that the media's anti-Labor discourse is one of the contributing factors for the public approval, the gradual sliding public approval in the last half of last century and the beginning of this one. And one of the reasons is that prior to about 1960, newspapers had reporters who specialised in IR. So they actually went out and found out both sides of the story and had more an in-depth sort of understanding of the issues. Nowadays, IR reporting is generally done by either political reporters who only sort of reported at the end, or crime reporters. Two of the foremost US scholars on media coverage of unions have actually condensed the collective findings of years of content analysis into a series of general comprehensive union frames. And although it's a US study, it's still very, very true for Australia. And they basically found that there were 8 lenses through which the media distort the audience's perception of organised workers. The first is that labour unions protect and encourage unproductive, usually fat, lazy and insubordinate workers. Number 2, we are unable to compete internationally in open markets because big, powerful unions have forced employers to pay exorbitant wages to unproductive workers. Number 3, although some very poor and abused workers, particularly women and migrants, may need to form unions to protect themselves, big unions usually fail to represent the interests of such workers. Number 4, and this is a beauty, union leaders, because they do not come from the educated or cultured classes, are more likely to be corrupted by the power they achieve than our business or political leaders. Number 5, unions should be volunteer societies, funded and led by unpaid professional staffs of selfless workers, and union dues should not be used to pay anyone's salary. Number 6, it's depressing, eh? There was a time long ago when unions were necessary, but now things are different. Employers are enlightened and would not generally try to abuse their workers, and in the few cases where they might, new federal laws can provide reasonable protection. Number 7, unions, bastards, institutionalised conflict. Unions came into being to solve a specific labour relations problem. They solved the problem, and instead of going away, they remained to dredge up conflict, where otherwise there would be perfect harmony. And finally, and you'll like this one, all unions are the same. All unions are therefore accountable for the corruption or excess of any one union or union leader and share the guilt or shame. Shame. And the media feed this narrative by a variety of different ways. Firstly, by what stories appear. The media is, of course, more likely to cover and sensationalise stories of union corruption or strike violence than they are to cover stories of successful negotiation of collective bargaining agreements. And because the media focuses on these infrequent yet dramatic events, the public get the impression that unions are violent, elitist, socially unresponsive, undemocratic and or criminal. And that's, look, partly because bad stuff sells news. We're actually emotionally wired to notice the bad stuff. And if you're on a news site, you know the stories you click on are the bad ones, not the good ones. But it's also the angle of the news story that helps frame the narrative. In the US, workers for the Bay Area Rapid Transit, which is known as BART, went on strike while negotiating a new contract. It was BART's first strike in 16 years. The workers were asking for a wage increase. They hadn't had one for 5 years. They wanted improved safety measures like bulletproof glass in station booths and better lighting in tunnels. This was the kind of headlines that ran. BART strike has transit commuters scrambling. BART strike hits commuters, no word on service resumption. BART strike, commuters find creative ways to get to work. And BART strike, what are my commute options? In all of these instances, the striking workers are presented as sort of a nefarious force fixated on disrupting other workers' commute, for they don't really mention the reason. And usually these kind of articles open with a profile of some poor unsuspecting sucker who can't figure out how they're going to get to work because of the evil BART employees. And that's not to say the commuter side shouldn't be covered, but by fixating on this one aspect of the story, of course, people don't hear from the BART workers themselves. When teachers in Chicago went on strike last year, their demands were pretty reasonable, and after just 9 days on strike, the CTU fought for and won a contract that included hiring more than 600 additional teachers in art, music and phys ed, making textbooks available on the first day of school, and bringing in the percentage of teacher evaluations that are decided by the standardised test scores down to the legal minimum of 30%. Yet the media presented both CTU and Union President Karen Lewis as shrill, women always get shrill, unreasonable, greedy forces more interested in raising the earth than rationally negotiating. The spin was that the strike was really about greedy teachers hell-bent on hurting kids quickly infiltrated the media's vernacular. And we see it here when a corporation chooses to move elements of their business offshore because they don't have to pay decent wages. It is portrayed at worst as a sad reality of the free market. Indeed, it's actually used by hard-right economists to attack unions and workers, saying they should accept lower wages and fewer rights, while company profits, of course, continue to soar. However, when ordinary working people join together to try and win themselves a fairer deal, they're portrayed as thugs, bullies, barons, or even the enemy within. And the language used in stories about unions is consistently negative, and you certainly don't need to look at the US for that. You could look at Grace Collier's column yesterday. The bargaining system is being gamed by unions. Some use it to set up their own profitable businesses, such as labour hire firms or insurance brokerages. Some use it to extort money from employers. And another perler, also from the never-ending gift that is Grace Collier. Any person who has held a leadership position in a private sector union affiliated to the Labor Party may have engaged in questionable conduct. That's all of you. No, she's not saying you have because you could see it, but you may have. And do you know the thing is, to the ordinary person reading that, you're guilty. Even the actual placement of news stories and strike coverage has an effect on the way it's seen by general public, because generally they're placed next to the crime. But we should be grateful that the bias is at least not as overt here as it is in the US. In 2009, lobbyist Rick Berman's misnamed Employee Federation Action Committee launched a $1 million ad campaign. One of the ads portrayed an employee named Joe, and Joe was engaged in pleasant negotiations with his supervisor until two union reps, who appeared to be modelled on The Sopranos, interrupt with unreasonable demands and threats. And by the end of the ad, poor Joe is seen struggling in his chair with duct tape over his mouth. And the Americans for Tax Reform, the ultra-conservative group led by Grover Norquist, has made union hate an interactive experience with their own online video game called Card Checked. In the game, the user plays a tattoo artist working in an environment where the Employee Free Choice Act has become law. Union reps follow you around trying to intimidate you into signing a card. If you refuse, they ramp up the threats and turn to violence. At one point, a pro-union co-worker is described as specialising in peace signs, rainbows and other original and conformist hippie symbols. Once the union is recognised, the labour bosses use your dues for buying luxury goods and going on vacation. Eventually, the union does so much damage that the shop is forced to close and you're out of a job. The game's final screen reads, "Game over, you lose." Unsurprisingly, even the TV and movies have shown unions out to be negative, but there's no surprise there because the people who own the papers usually also own the studios. Films, even ones sympathetic to workers, have seldom been sympathetic to unions. Of the 62 televised dramas portraying labour unions and management between 70 and 90, the vast majority provided negative depictions, including similar themes of being corrupt, violent, strike-orientated and not necessary. Media content, of course, has a significant influence on public opinion, policy making and even criminal justice processes. So when unions are portrayed as a bunch of corrupt fat blokes carrying around brown paper bags full of cash, it has two ramifications. It makes it very hard to get public support when you're trying to negotiate things, and of course it makes it very hard to get new members. But don't despair, it's not all bad. Some of the recent findings of various royal commissions, of which there are many, haven't gone quite to plan for the anti-union brigade. And if the unions don't come out covered in glory, well, neither do the other side. And sometimes a zero-sum game is a good place to start. The social media has also changed things because it means you can talk to members and general public and control your own story and take them along each campaign journey so that the public no longer sees actions like strikes as the first resort when in fact they're usually the last. So how can unions campaign effectively against the negativity? Firstly, you need to look at yourselves as brands, and people hate that when you say, oh, you need to talk about yourself as a brand. It's like, no, that's manipulative or it's selling or whatever. It's not. A brand is actually, it's how you portray yourself, but it's just as much about how people perceive you. A good brand is a promise kept. Unions are terrible at branding themselves. They tend to fight each campaign on its issues alone. So it means the next time there's a campaign to fight, starting from zero on those issues again. Whereas if you have a really strong brand, it actually means you already have a relationship with the general public. They know who you are and trust you. So each campaign you're starting a little bit higher in their mind. It's also easier to attract people, particularly for a union like United Voice, where you're competing against other unions sometimes for the same members. Unfortunately, most union campaigns don't stand out because they always feature someone talking to camera like that, a bunch of real people, and they struggle to stand out on TV. Whereas if you do an ad that's actually got a really strong idea in it, it will stand out more. And a creative idea is a thing kind of that holds everything together. It's like a creative hook that sort of gets your message across in a way that's really interesting, because the fact is we're bombarded by 5,000 pieces of information every day. So you can have an ad that says everything you want it to say, but if people aren't paying attention, you're actually just wasting your money. Great creative also gets passed around. You'll get free media out of it. If you do a really worthy union ad, it'll get passed around all the people who already like you and not outside that sphere. So if you want to get outside that sphere, it actually means you need to be a little bit brave. People only share stuff that's cool. 60 hours worth of video content gets uploaded onto YouTube every single minute. I kid you not, so you're competing against lolcats and stuff like that. But the very best thing a union can do to fight against the negativity of the media isn't a multi-million-dollar ad campaign or even a social media campaign. It's something that's been proven to be effective and doesn't cost a cent. It's just 4 words. As a union member. The most effective marketing tool a union has is its members. And part of the reason negative media portrayal has been so successful is that increasingly people have no contact with unions in their lives. So the only time they hear about them is on the news. And what we know from elections and what's been proven over and over again, the very best way to change someone's mind is one-on-one contact. So if you want to change the perception of unions, let as many people as you can know that you belong to one. Thank you.